Now, as I'm sure you know, the book of Esther is going to center around a character called Esther. She is a Jewish girl living in the city of Susa, which is a bit of a surprise, actually, because you've read the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, and so you know that the Jews have been granted permission to go back to their homeland and rebuild the city of Jerusalem. In other words, when the book of Esther begins, the super committed religious types, they are back in the land, rebuilding the city and the temple. And it's the less keen, less committed types that are still scattered throughout the Persian Empire and have not seized the opportunity to return to the promised land. Which is interesting to know, isn't it? So this story here features not the super saints. They were back in the promised land. This story features the ordinary, everyday, less than perfect people of God. Perhaps people like you and me. So the curtain lifts on chapter 1 and we see King Xerxes reigning in Susa. And we read here that he throws a huge banquet. Now, this was not just a party for the sake of it. It was tradition to hold a great big feast, a banquet like this, before taking your country into war. Notice in particular that the military leaders are invited to this feast in verse 3. As an aside, we know from other ancient documents that shortly after this feast, he fought against the Greeks and 300 Spartans. If you've ever seen the movie 300, not necessarily recommending it, but if you've already seen it in your misspent youth, you would have seen a depiction of Xerxes in that film. He is this man here from the book of Esther. He thought of himself as a god king, and his splendor matched his own made-up description of himself. The splendor on display here in chapter 1 is absolutely unbelievable, and this banquet went on for a full 180 days. Can you imagine? After that 6 months banquet, there is another 7 days where all the people in the capital, from the least to the greatest, are invited. And then on the final day of the banquet, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, we read, he commanded his servants to bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown in order to display her beauty for the people and the nobles, for she was lovely to look at. Now, the fact is, we're not told the full extent of the king's intentions here, but I think it's pretty obvious that they were not especially noble. Certainly, the queen doesn't like the idea of what the king has in his mind. She does not want to parade her beauty for his drunken friends, and Queen Vashti refused to come. This is an amazing, almost humorous upset in this book. The writer has spent so long wowing us with the dazzling splendor of the king. He shows off all his wealth, and then he is shown up by his wife. The king becomes furious, which again is a little insight into his character. Rather than being humbled by his own thoughtlessness, instead he gets angry and calls together a meeting for his most trusted advisors. At the end of this emergency meeting, they make a rule that Queen Vashti is not allowed to come before the king again. I can't imagine that she's crying too many tears over that. And then they send out a decree that all wives must respect their husbands from now on, which of course is the one thing that would spread this story more than anything else imaginable. Just imagine dispatches being sent from all corners of the kingdom, from India to Ethiopia, and everyone is being told, from now on, wives must respect their husbands. And of course, everyone will say, what prompted this new decree to have to be announced on every street corner? And the story will be spread. Oh, I don't know if you know, the king's wife publicly embarrassed him at a party. You can imagine little clusters of giggling groups all across the world. Did she really? The nerve of that woman. Tell me everything. And so, in an effort to secure the respect of husbands everywhere, the king accidentally publicizes his own humiliation to millions and millions of people who otherwise would never have heard about it. At the end of the chapter, we are told of the plan that the queen's royal position will be given to someone else, someone who is better than her, which of course will make a way for Esther to enter the story in the next chapter. Now, just think of this. Because the king made this foolish request in his drunken state, the queen said no, which embarrassed him publicly. Because the king was embarrassed publicly, he had to respond publicly by removing Vashti and seeking a replacement. Because the king sought a beautiful replacement, Esther would rise up to fill that vacant place. And because Esther was queen at just the right time, she was able to divert the destruction that would have fallen upon her people. The whole story of the salvation of the Jews here, it all turns upon the hinge of an apparently insignificant moment. A fleeting thought that entered the mind of the king. Isn't that amazing? It is impossible to predict then how circumstances will unfold. And the infinitely wiser thing to do in life than second guessing what is going on and where it will lead is to simply trust the one who is in control. You may not know why circumstances are unfolding the way they are. You may not see it even in your lifetime. But you can trust the goodness of our sovereign God because he knows what he's doing. He's perfectly loving and infinitely powerful, and he holds our lives within his hand.